Hello and welcome to today's webinar, Implementing Directories in the Wiki, how to keep track of various collections. In this webinar, I want to show you a little bit of how we can organize specific sort of data in the Wiki that is recurring data and is typically used in collections. As you can see, I was not very specific in what directories to use because this is more like a pattern you can use in the wiki, and it can be used in a lot of use cases and scenarios, which of course we're going to touch in the course of this webinar. My name is Markus Glaser. I am the CEO of Hallo Welt and responsible for everything that's related to technology here. And I'm very happy that you all joined us to see this webinar. Okay, let's start. What are we talking about? I want to quickly show you what I mean by directories, what the general principles are. And then we're going to dive into how to implement that in a wiki. We're going to touch a set of technologies here like namespaces, subpages, ask queries from semantic MediaWiki, and even a Lua module for some eye candy in the end. And of course, I'll give you some examples of how this can work out in practice later on. Let's talk about the question, what are directories? So if you think of some examples for directories, those could be like a phone directory, phone number directory, a software directory, a directory of procedures, or also maybe like supplier directory or stuff like that. So it is basically a list of things, and it has some, in my view, it has some common properties. So first of all, when you have a directory, what you want is you want to be able to see all that the contents of the directory in one place. So not as the usual knowledge management that happens in my wiki, where knowledge is spread all across the articles, but you want to have a central point of entry and probably also a central page where you can see all the information, all the entries in one place. The other thing is the directory strives to be complete. So if you have a directory of procedures, which you may need to have for compliance reasons, then of course the auditors require you to have a complete directory of procedures, not only like the first 5 procedures that come to your mind. Also, a directory collects similar things. So a phone directory collects names and phone numbers. A software directory collects the software you use in your company, for example, and it has always the same kind of structure. So let's say a software directory, one entry consists of the name of the software, its version, maybe what kind of licenses are used, maybe who's the other side of the contract, maybe some tips and tricks, but it's always the same stuff you expect there. So it has some common structure. What we want from a directory is it should be easy to manage, easy to add new items, easy to remove, easy to find items. And that's, of course, given the structure of directory, I mean, that's most of the time an alphabetical list of things. It is easy to find and identify the correct bits and pieces. And also in the context of a wiki, what we also want to achieve is we want to be able to display parts of the directory in the context of a page. So we want to see the specific entries that are relevant for a specific page and be able to associate them with the page. So that way we can only show the relevant part of the directory in a specific context. So how can we achieve such a thing in the wiki? Well, the thing I want to introduce you to and I want to show you today is a pattern which I call assigned articles. Essentially, what we do is we have a main article, and then we have some additional information in a different namespace in an article with the same name. So it's assigned or associated with the article. So if you look at this sketch here, then the main article, let's assume we have a collection of minutes. So the main article would, for example, be a landing page for a team. So let's say the team DevOps. So the article would be called Team DevOps. And then we would create an article called Team DevOps with the same name in a different namespace. So here, this example takes nodes, which is like the most neutral form of any collection. So we have an article Team DevOps, and we have an associated article node in the node namespace called Team DevOps. And then if we want to add one or more nodes, we would add them as subpages, which you see in the article title marked by the slash. So a specific node would be node article like Team DevOps node, Team DevOps slash my first node, node Team DevOps, my second node, etc., etc. What you can see here is that this pattern relies a lot on convention. So it is vital for this to work that the article title here and the article title here and also the article title here are the same. And we're going to achieve this by adding some functionality, by helping our users to create articles following these patterns. And you're going to see that in the next couple minutes. How do we start? First of all, let's create some structures. We need a namespace node that contains all the nodes. So by putting all the nodes into the nodes namespace, what we can do is we can get an overview of this namespace and we see all the nodes that we have. If you would use a different use case and we would say, okay, this is like all the procedures, then you'd have a procedures namespace, and then all the procedures of your company are in the procedures namespace. We need to set it up to use subpages, obviously. And second thing we need is a template node that we use to create some uniform structure for each node. So each node will be using that template as a prefill, as a text prefill. And that way we can create a lot of nodes entries that look very similar. So let's see this. I'm going to show you that in the live system. So what we have here is a wiki, which is some sort of a demo wiki. And you can see that I would create a namespace in the first place. So I go to namespace manager. By the way, I'm logged into this wiki as a admin. So I have all the rights and I can do everything that's required. Let's open the namespace manager. I have already created that namespace here. You do that by just clicking on the plus sign, add the name like this. And then what we need is subpages because that's part of our structure. We want to mark it as a content namespace, so it is shown in the search and in various other places. Of course, our users want to use the visual editor, and sometimes it's also useful depending on what you're going to do. If you want to use structured data to enable semantic MediaWiki. Now I have already set this up, so I click on cancel, but normally you would click on done, and then that's it. So here is our node namespace. And the second thing we need for uniform nodes is we need a template node. I have already also prepared that. So let's just find it. The node template would be in the template namespace, as you can see here. There it is. So I can open it for you. And let's have a look at how a node could look like. So maybe, it's a meeting node. So we add headings for participants, a question, and maybe the result of the whatever, the important thing you want to take a note of in the end. Now, here's one interesting thing. That is a backlink, and I'm going to show you how to produce that and why we need it. So if you go back to our structure, then what you see is that our main entry point is the article. So my users, they want to work on, they are part of Team DevOps, for example. So they go to the Team DevOps landing page, and then they want to see all the nodes that are associated with the Team DevOps. So on the article itself, there will be a list of nodes. So now the user clicks on the node and is being directed to a specific node, which we can see here. And now, of course, the user wants an easy way to get back to the original article. Easy way to get back is we provide the user with a button, a back button. And the back button always has to understand where it should go back to. Now, since we are in a template, we don't know where exactly that page came from, so we need to add some dynamics here. And I'm going to show you this in Wiki text. No, let's go to visual editing. That's also good. So this back button is a button. You can enter such a button by using the content droplets here and then type button or search for button. And now if you click here, then a button will be inserted. I mean, this is not a good way to put it in a heading. Now here is the button and I can edit it. And what you can see here is the button has a text back. In this case, I can also say back to origin page or whatever we want to use here. The important thing here is that we use as a target, we don't use a specific page, but we use some sort of magic word here. So this is a dynamic element in wiki text. As you can see, it starts with 2 curly braces, and then it says the base page name. Now, what is the base page name? We're going back to our structure. You see, this is the name of the article. The first part here before the colon is the namespace. And then we have the base page name that goes from the colon to the first slash. And what we have after that, that's the subpage name. So if I refer to the base page name, then I refer to basically article, and that is exactly the same title as we can see here. So if I target this back to base page name, the link will point to the original article automatically. Again, this heavily relies on convention. So it's important that this part of the article name here is exactly the same as the article name here. Okay, so by doing this, we get this backlink to the original page, and we can use that as a template now on every node we produce. One additional thing we want to do is we want to have a list of nodes somewhere. So what I did is I created a base page here, webinar directories. And now what we want to do is we want to add to that a list of nodes. How can we do that? Again, let's go to Visual Editor here. And I use another droplet here that is called subpages, right? So that creates a list of subpages. In particular, it doesn't create a list of subpages of this page because here we are in main namespace, but we wanted to create a list of subpages in the nodes namespace. So what I do is I add, as a namespace, I add node here, because that's the name of my namespace. The parent page, like the page that serves as the basis for all the subpages, does have the exact same title as we have here. So I could put in webinar directories, and then it would find all the subpages for this particular page. Now, the problem here is if you want to use this text as a copy-paste text for other articles, or maybe even embed it in a template that you can reuse, then obviously it's not a good idea to place some actual article names in here. But again, we need such a dynamic element. So what we are going to do is we are going to use the curly braces, and we will use the page name of this page. So that's okay. In this scenario, we don't need to use the base page name because we maybe want to be able to add, like to use this in a different namespace as well. And page name also includes the namespace. Okay, so if I insert this now and save my changes, then wait, let's just add some heading here. Nodes. So let's do it like this. And then use this as a heading. Now we will see nothing because we don't have any nodes in here. Let's create a node by just adding one to that namespace. So I create a new page in the node namespace and then webinar directories / my first node. Okay. I mean, that's just the manual way to do it. And when I now click on done, we will create a node. As you see, the template we just created before is not used here. We're going to do that in a little bit, but let's just create a node to see the effect here. Create node. Okay, if we save that and now go back to, you see here's the backlink would be required. I have to use my browser's back. But you can see that now magically the node appears here in the list of subpages. That's basically the proof of concept. If we follow this pattern, we can add more nodes to this system. So we have created a namespace, we have created a template and added a back button. That's the structure or the path how we would do it. So in the end, we want to use the article. From the article, we want to create a node using the template here. So that's then the final result. And we want to list all the nodes in the article. So we have done the listing in the overview article, in our case, webinar directories. So now we need to be able to create a node in a better way. Because you see, if I have a user and I say, okay, you can use this really cool directory, all you have to do is you have to follow a series of conventions letter by letter. And if you misspell it, then the whole thing will break. Then no user will ever use it, obviously. So we need to have a means of making the user make it easy for the user to create such nodes and not care about the naming conventions and all that. So what we do is we will use an input box for creation. What we want to achieve is we want to get a text field. In the text field, the user can enter a title of their node. And then the node will be created according to the pattern and according to the conventions. So in order to do that, we need to use some wiki text here. Unfortunately, there is no UI support for these, like more complex means of doing stuff, because there's just too many options and too many things. These are very mighty tools, the input box, the ask query, but that makes it incredibly hard to use them in the UI. So what we have to do is we have to go to write some wiki text, but don't be afraid, I'll guide you through that. First, what we want to do is we want to use the input backs and these magic words. They're always started with 2 curly braces. And in this scenario, what we do is we use a input box. Please don't forget the pipe here, because that separates the parameters from the name of this magic word. Now, what does that input box do? How do we parameterize it? As a type, we use create. There are also other types like search, but create is the one we want to do. We want to create pages. We don't use any default text here because we want the user to be free in the way they choose the name of the node. You could also add some default here. Then I'm skipping the next 2. Then there's a button next to the input box that basically fires the page creation. And we need to label that, because if it was just say okay, then nobody would know what to do with that input box. So we label it with the create node. Break no is can be some visuals, so we don't want a line break between the input field and the OK button or the create node button. And then in the target article, which we're going to create, we want to use Visual Editor. So use Visual Editor equals true, because our users, when they create a node, they want to use the Visual Editor, not use wiki text. These 2 lines here are where the magic happens. So we have a line, preload. And in preload, we tell the system which article to take the text from. Preload is the template we just created before the template node. And that's when we create this page. We want to staff it with the text of template node, which we just created. Also, the prefix part here is what is added to the title that a user gives the node. So whenever the user types something like, this is my fancy node, before the article title, before the my fancy node, this text will be added here. As you can see, we hard code the namespace node. So all the pages will be created in node. Then we say, use the page name of the current page. So if I start off Team DevOps, and then I would, if it of the page Team DevOps, then this would be node colon Team DevOps slash, and then we are in the subpage space where for some convenience reasons, I add a timestamp here. So there's some sort of temporal order in the articles, but of course that's not necessary. So that's just some additional information here. So this adds a timestamp with the year, month, and day, and then underscore, and then the actual number. Let's see how this works in practice. And to do that, we open the page in source edit mode. I have prepared that already, so we can just copy it in here and use it. So what you can see here is that's the input box, and I can just use like my test node. That's very wiki style. You can of course use spaces here. I click on create node, and then it will be opened here. And now I can edit the node. So this is my second node. I save it, and then we go back to the directories page. And you see now we have two nodes here. Okay, so that gives us a round trip. We can create nodes now, we can associate with the page, and whenever we create nodes, they will be added here. Now, this display of the nodes is not very perfect and not very flexible. So what we want to do now is we want to improve the way how we can display the results or display the list of nodes. And the way to do it is to use a ask query instead of a sub page in this scenario. So let me just do that here. So I go back and edit this page in source mode. And I also have prepared something, and I'm going to walk you through it. So this is the simple version. Again, ask queries are not something you can do using the UI, but you have to actually use wiki text here. So what does this do? It starts the ask query, and the ask query is basically a selection of pages according to some metadata parameters. And in this case, what we use for selection and for filtering of pages is two things. First of all, we tell it that we want to select only pages that are subpages that start with the same name as this one here. That's done like this. The tilde here tells the mechanism to allow wildcarding here. So we say when page name is replaced with the name of the current page. Again, I'm using these dynamic values here because then we can just use this as a copy template and we can put it elsewhere and use that on every page without having to modify it. So we select all pages that start with page name, then a slash, so basically a subpage, and then anything that comes afterwards. And we also need to restrict it to the namespace node. So that's also important because we only want the nodes and nothing else. Then you can parameterize the ask query. So I limit it to 5. There's more results, then this is what's shown. I have it be sorted by creation date, and here you can already see that we are able to access more data than we can access in just the subpage version we had before. So creation date is a metadata which I can just query. Descending, and then if there's nothing available, we write something in English, of course. No notes available. No. Okay, now let me save this, and we should be able to see now a second list of pages, and here they are. It's not very nice though. That is because I just use a very plain list of things. The ask query itself can be, it does have several formats, so you can also use list format or a table format instead. Now, that is also one thing I want to show you, and that's the last bit. I want to show you how to make this more beautiful and how to actually dynamically react to data that's in there. So let's just open one of those nodes and see what kind of data we have available. How do we see that? We can go to in the settings or in the toolbar here. We can go to browse properties, and that's the properties we have available in any page. So you see it has information about whether this is a checklist, what's the page author, when was it created, modification date, etc. And of course, this is like semantic MediaWiki. So if you have a semantics set up, then you can use all sorts of metadata here. Now, I want to show you one particular thing. So let's add something to this page. We have this great feature where you can actually add the result of a decision to your page. So let's just open that droplet, and you see that's the decision droplet. I can insert that, and we came to the conclusion that, I don't know, decisions are great. So that was our decision. Let's insert that. I save the changes. And then as a result, we get, that's one of the funny things about decisions. I can see that in the page properties. So here is a list of decisions that are associated with this particular page. What we want to do now is we want to change this overview in such a way that it A, tells me if there was a decision made in the meeting or in the node, and B, what is the decision. So how can we do that? First of all, we need to, again, go to the page and do some modifications on the ask query. First of all, we need to add that information about decisions. So that's how we do that. We can just add the pipe and question mark. That means this should also be queried. And the property as shown before is decision. So we just add that here. What you can see here is that the display now changes to a table format because we're using more than one result. And it actually found that decision here and it displays it already. Now the eye candy bit here is we want to add an indicator. Like if there's no decision, then it should indicate in red that there is no decision. And if there is a decision, it should indicate in green. This is a much more complicated layout. So we have to actually change the ask query and the format of the ask query to some customized format. How do we do that? I'm going to show you first. So we changed the format to template, and that means that for each result I get, the result is not being displayed by the ask query itself, but it is handed over to a template. And the template is basically, you can use any wiki text in the template. So I have created a template node line, which does some stuff here for people who know wiki text. This creates a link. And it creates the link. It splits up the title, the article title, into different parts, and it takes only the part after the namespace and after the base name. That's because the list of nodes, you can see it here, should not display the namespace. And also, we don't want to see that webinar directories because that's just super redundant if you have several nodes and it always shows webinar directories. In the first place, it's just unuseful information. So we split the title up into various files. What you see here, the number 1 is a numbered parameter. So number 1 says this is the first column. This is the data of the first column. So if you look at this, we have 2 columns here. This is the data of the first column. This is the data of the second column, and it's referenced by number 2. So we're gonna use that later. So we have show me link. This link creates a link to basically article title, and then it displays only one part of that title. We saw how to see the attribute. We show it, and then once we have that template line, as I said, we want to add a green dot if there is a decision. So we also add to that template line, we add this magic word invoke. So invoke, what does it do? It starts some sort of mini program where a decision is made. Is there, based on certain conditions, do I want to use a green or a red dot? So I'm going to show you this real quick, and then we're going to check how we do the dot. So let's add this. By the way, link none is just something that's advised to use when using a template, because otherwise the wiki would add some links, some link syntax, some curly brackets, which is not very nice. Okay. Please also note in my wiki here, this note line is called Notizzeile. It's German word for it. Okay, let's just see how it looks. So it's done, and now you can see we have now this indicator dot before, and we have the text as we wanted it. So I'm going to show you the template for the note line first. Template. As again, it's written in German here, but only the title. So that's what the note line is. So basically, that's the part we have seen of the title. So this gives me only the relevant part of the title, references the first column of my result. And then here, I just output the plain second column of the result. So let's go back to this overview. You can see it here. Decisions are great. So that's number 2. And as an additional, I add that same second column to a Lua module here. So you can see that, which is used as an entry parameter for this module or mini program. Now, the mini program is, sits in the module namespace, and you can see how it looks like here. So basically, from a wiki editor perspective, there's a little bit of overhead which you don't really need to understand. But basically, we have this module indicator, which we referenced in our page. And then we have a method for empty. You could call that anything. So I use it, I call it for empty. And what it does is it takes the argument that's been handed over, frame args1, and checks if that is empty. So if there is no decision, and then we set the color to red. Otherwise, the color is set to green. So if I set the color to green, and if this decision is empty, we set the color to red. And then we basically go to this additional method here. And we simply return some HTML. So span in a specific color, and the color is the color we set up here. And then this crazy number here, that's the Unicode character for this circle we have seen. And basically that's it. So this outputs the green circle we've seen before. Okay. Now, what can we do with it? So there are some examples I've seen out in the wild. So one obviously is meeting minutes. You can have pages for, say, each team, and then each team can have their meeting minutes in the wiki using this mechanism. You can also use it for incident tracking. So in this case, there's specific error message, and we wanted to see, we wanted to keep track of actual pages where this specific error message showed up, so we can basically use this as a list of incidents. Or in a different scenario, you can also use this to create a list of suppliers related to a specific, say, department of your organization or to a specific case, and then add some supplier information. You see, in this case, we make more use of semantic metadata. So this has like more information, like when is the audit due, or do we have a data processing agreement? And there's also this indicator, which in this case doesn't check for empty, but it checks how far are we away from the date that's being set. That's it. I hope that I was able to give you a good overview over this pattern of creating catalogs or creating collections or directories in a wiki. Yeah. If there's any questions, of course, I'm happy to answer them. Otherwise, thanks for your participation and have a nice day.